Hey, so I made this video like a while ago that was about how we all live in the future. It was like from the perspective of like, the reality that exists right now is really kind of science fiction-y compared to, what it used to be a few decades ago. And this is obvious to most people. You can see signs of that from, what we see in consumer electronics to autonomous vehicles to, online shopping with same-day delivery. But there's also other things that you might see that aren't as shiny, like, rising global temperatures that lead to longer wildfire seasons and more intense hurricanes, like weird things happening in politics, cyber attacks and breaches of databases, jobs being automated, tension between nuclear powers, things that, let's say, might cause you some concern. I see these things too. And it makes me wonder sometimes, like, is the future okay? All right, so the future of humanity, the future of humans, that's the future we care about. Will that future be okay? Depends on whether or not we'll be okay. So will humans be okay? What do humans need to be okay? Just a few things like fresh air, good health, clean water, food, shelter, let's throw in Wi-Fi, transportation, education, insurance, a family/stable community, goals and aspirations. We could stop there. Most of these things cost money. So in order for someone to be okay, it's pretty much imperative that they do have money or know someone who has money. Most people get money from their job. If you have a job, you have money, you can survive. But as far as securing your future goes, you can only go so far. Of course, there's always some random disaster that can come out of nowhere. If your money gets threatened, if you lose your job, if you get injured or something like that, then you can quickly go from being okay to not okay in a hurry. Even if you're super rich and like don't have to worry about a job, don't have to worry about paying for anything, you still have vulnerabilities like a tornado or earthquake could take out your house randomly, and then you'd have to go to your other house, I guess. So we know the future isn't guaranteed for anybody in particular. It never is, never has been, never will be. But what about society as a whole? I've been curious about this for like most of my life, along with anybody else who's seen like a Terminator movie or seen WALL-E or read 1984. Like, it's in the culture. What's the future gonna look like? Is the world gonna eventually be run by machines with humans as second-class beings? Like, is humankind gonna destroy habitability on the planet, forcing people to leave or, like build domes? Is the combination of the mass surveillance that a lot of people experience and the data harvesting and the targeted advertising, are all those things like robbing us of our agency as free-thinking individuals? Is the world getting better or worse? Tough questions. But since I made a list of everything that humans need to be okay, all we have to do is just go along that list and see how those things are gonna change over time. The short answer is that the future is gonna be okay. Maybe. It might be bad, it might be great, but it's probably gonna be okay. Like just okay. One thing I do need to say first is that if it looks like the world is ending from all the bad things that you're seeing on your local screen, it's most likely because of just how fast we communicate news these days, just information in general. It's just so much more to see, so much more things to click on. And bad news gets more clicks than good news too, obviously. Turns out by a lot of the long-term trends, the world is actually doing better in a lot of ways. Let's look at the past and the future of health. Good health is important. People need to be healthy. The life expectancy in most countries is still going up. That's good. The number of people who die in armed conflict is like miles away from what it used to be like back in the mid-1900s. Plagues and epidemics, of course, has been greatly reduced. Healthcare practice has improved, of course, over the last 200 years. Like, doctors wash their hands now, and there's been other advancements. Nowadays, you can buy a smartwatch that can, read your heartbeat and notify an ambulance if you pass out and fall. In healthcare, I think it's going to get even more and more personal and predictive, and I think technology is going to be a large part of that. In the future, the health technology could be like inside of our actual bodies. Like we could have, I don't know, smart blood or like mini microscopic machines that keep track of our vitals and the chemical, stuff like, I don't know. So health and healthcare are looking pretty good in the future, I'd say. As long as you have access to it, and money might be a big barrier there. What about food? Food is a distribution problem, and it's a weird one. It's also more about the food being healthy and nutritious, since obesity is actually a bigger problem than malnutrition. With climate change in effect, it does make sense to worry about the yield of crops being, diminished or compromised because of a natural disaster. It also makes sense to worry about carbon emissions from factory farm animals. And also, just the general growth of the world's population over time there's gonna be mouths to feed. In this case, also, I see technology doing a lot of things to help. Vertical farms and other types of indoor growing establishments, I see being able to provide a lot of supplementary food to a lot of areas. Genetic engineering also can give us different types of food, better crops. I know some people kind of trip about GMOs, but trust me, we're past that. I can see fake meat or like cultured lab-grown meat getting more popular and maybe reducing the demand of like, you know, meat that grows on animals. So there's a lot going on. And although food production is filled with all kinds of inefficiencies, I feel like food is going to be okay in the future. But what about water? This one is pretty closely related to the food question, as you might expect. Water is, of course, a pretty renewable resource. And as far as the future goes, as far as the water that you drink and cook with and shower with, that's not really going to go away. But what is in danger of drying up is a lot of the water that's used for agriculture. And this would just be like kind of some select areas, but a lot of farms use underground, you know, like aquifers to get groundwater, and some of those aquifers will eventually dry up. So there could be potentially some water issues in the future. Let's talk about air. Probably the most urgent thing that we need on a regular basis to be okay. Gotta breathe. If you go more than 200 seconds without air, you're probably gonna die or pass out. Air needs to be fresh too. If you're breathing polluted air, then you're probably gonna eventually have health issues. This is another instance where rich people have an advantage by being able to live in areas that aren't heavily polluted. Hopefully pollution decreases with the mass adoption of electric vehicles that we're going to see over the next couple of decades. I mean, we'll see how that goes. I mean, I don't know how fully that can be tackled. All right, so we're kind of lukewarm on the future maybe so far. Future health and future food look pretty good, but water and air, maybe not so much, maybe not as much. Also, everything depends on whether or not you actually have money to access these things, which ties everything back to your job. And I'm gonna get to jobs in a minute too, but moving forward. So what about shelter and transportation? We need those things too. How's that gonna change over the future? The good news is that due to increased connectivity, more people are gonna be able to live wherever they want to. Also, driverless cars can carry people faster and farther than they would drive ordinarily. So it's gonna kind of change our relationship with distance, I think too. In the future, you might have a job that's 2 hours away, and then you get into a car and sleep for 2 hours on your commute, or maybe just work completely remotely. The bad news is that due to the increasing number and severity of natural disasters that we're gonna see and kind of are already seeing, are going to mean that a lot of people are going to be displaced potentially. So your shelter is not necessarily going to be guaranteed. Millions of people are going to need to move out of areas that literally become too hot to live in. And even more people that live in coastal areas are probably going to have to seek, higher ground because sea levels are rising. And then what about the jobs in the future? After all, whether or not you're doing okay right now has a lot to do with whether or not you have money right now. Really, really bad news on this one. Jobs are going away. At least how we think about them. Jobs are disappearing left and right thanks to artificial intelligence and automation. Jobs like driving a truck or driving for Uber are going to go away in the next couple of years because it's just going to be more efficient to not have a driver. Like, it's going to be safer to not have a driver. Fast food restaurants and drive-thrus are getting automated because software is cheaper than human workers. And not just low-skilled jobs, like white-collar jobs, like high-skilled jobs, like jobs that you need an actual college degree to even apply for. Machines are doing better than us. A person has to go through all of grade school and then like 8 years of higher education, like 4 years of med school, residency, whatever, to become a radiologist, okay? To be a radiologist. And an algorithm right now can read x-rays better than any doctor in the world right now. So it hasn't happened yet completely, like, granted, but we can't compete with machines. Like, it's a fact. Like, as far as like capital efficiency or whatever, like when it comes to the market value of a human working, we just can't compete. Computers beat us in chess 20 years ago. 20 years ago. It's like, we're on life support now. Come on. There's probably a bot right now that can make better videos than me. So given that automation and smart algorithms are completely undercutting and will continue to undercut the value of human work in the future, many people are calling for something like a UBI, a universal basic income for humans, not machines, where everybody receives money in order to survive in a world that has privatized survival. A world that is, as we speak, automating all the means of production with fewer and fewer winners at the top.
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're gonna have a choice.
So given all this, why do I still feel like the future is gonna be okay? Like, from what I'm talking about, it sounds kind of dystopian. Like, I didn't even get to like, whether we own our data and like, the big tech companies that have all these people's data and, they buy in, they sell it, and whether or not we can profit from our data or own our data. There's a lot to talk about. And I'm not ignoring the obvious risks. If a war breaks out and, some country decides to drop a nuclear bomb on, like that could happen. A super virus could suddenly pop out of nowhere and cause a global epidemic. Like, these things can happen. Earth could be hit by an asteroid. Like, we literally didn't see the last one that got close. But I'm optimistic about the future for two reasons. One, it's good to be optimistic. That's how good things tend to happen. Two, I feel like people can really see the problems that are going on in the world. Like, we have the information, we can see it on our screens, on every screen, you know. And I think that whatever changes need to happen will be made, or like eventually will be made, just because the future requires it. Human beings right now have access to more data and intelligence than, you know, ever before. So like, we're pretty well equipped to tackle these challenges. All of that brain power / processing power is going to be put to use. Hopefully the future's going to be okay. Fingers crossed. But that's my take. If you're still watching, I'm curious, what do you think about the future? Like, what do you think about the future of people? What do you think we're going to do? What do you think is going to happen? Leave a comment. Let's discuss. Thanks for watching.